She walked into the dealership wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, inquiring about a luxury car. The salesman looked her up and down with disdain. "I'm sorry, but I think you're in the wrong place," he sneered, gesturing toward the exit. "These vehicles start at $300,000. As other staff members snickered and customers stared, her face flushed with humiliation. Without a word, she turned and left. The next morning, a gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up outside the dealership. When the back door opened, the salesman's jaw dropped. He never saw it coming. The prestigious Boston luxury Motors sparkled under the morning light, its glass walls showcasing a fleet of exotic vehicles most could only dream of owning. Porsche, Bentley, Aston Martin, Ferrari, each more expensive than the last. Margaret Collins, Maggie to those who knew her, stepped through the doors, her brown ponytail bouncing slightly with each step. Her simple white t-shirt, well-worn jeans, and minimal makeup reflected a woman who valued practicality over presentation. At 35, she exuded a quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was. What wasn't apparent from her modest appearance was that Maggie was the founder and driving force behind the Collins Foundation for Children with Disabilities, an organization that had transformed thousands of young lives. Years before meeting her now husband, she had built the foundation from nothing, pouring her heart and expertise in special needs development into creating real change. As she entered the showroom, her eyes immediately fell on a sleek midnight blue coupe, perfect for her sister's 40th birthday. Caroline had always dreamed of owning a luxury car, and after beating breast cancer last year, Maggie wanted to give her something truly special. She could easily afford it. The success of her foundation, combined with her personal investments, had made her more than comfortable, though few knew that. Across the showroom, Blake Thompson adjusted his blue tie and straightened his navy suit jacket. As sales manager, he prided himself on being able to spot serious buyers instantly. Said, his tone laced with condescension. "It starts at $285,000. Maggie nodded, unfazed. "Perfect. I'd like to take a closer look." Blake Thompson's smile tightened further. He'd seen this before, people wandering in to daydream about cars they could never afford. With end-of-month quotas looming and 3 serious buyers expected that afternoon, he had no time for fantasies. "That's the limited edition Azure. Only 15 were made this year," he informed her, watching for any sign of hesitation. But Maggie simply met his gaze calm and composed. "That's why I'd like to see it." And just like that, her day at the dealership began, a day that would change perspectives for everyone involved. He said, emphasizing each word as if speaking to a child, "Perhaps I could direct you to our used car division. They're in a separate building about 3 blocks east." Maggie noticed how his eyes darted over her simple clothing, lingering on her scuffed sneakers. She was accustomed to such judgments. Most people had no idea she deliberately chose this way of living, finding freedom and simplicity despite having access to immense wealth. "I'd really like to learn more about this one," she persisted politely. "Is it possible to see the interior?" Blake's expression soured. Behind him, 2 salesmen exchanged knowing glances. "The Azure is by appointment only," he lied smoothly. "Our serious clients typically schedule private viewings." Just then, a couple dressed in designer clothing entered. Blake's demeanor transformed instantly. "Please excuse me," he said to Maggie without actually looking at her. "Why don't you take a brochure? Daniel can help you with that." He strode toward the couple, arms outstretched in welcome. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, wonderful to see you." The Azure. Blake's smile faltered for the briefest moment before he turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral. "As I mentioned earlier," he said smoothly, "this model is available by appointment only." Daniel, still standing beside Maggie, shifted uncomfortably. He had just finished explaining the vehicle's features to her, only to watch Blake openly contradict himself. Maggie, however, remained composed. "That's quite all right," she had assured Daniel earlier, fully understanding the dynamics at play. Across the showroom, Blake had been performing his well-rehearsed sales routine. "This particular model has a waiting list of 8 months," he had told Mrs. Harrington with practiced charm, "but I've set aside one for special clients." Mrs. Harrington ran a manicured hand along the leather interior, eyes filled with admiration. It's exquisite, but I'm not sure about the color. We could certainly discuss custom options, Blake assured her. At that moment, Maggie quietly stepped forward, standing just within earshot. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I was hoping to inquire about, talking about nearly $300,000. Blake's face was flushed, his irritation now fully on display. The Harringtons exchanged uneasy glances, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before them. Several nearby customers had paused their own browsing to watch the exchange, while Daniel hovered anxiously at the periphery, his expression torn between frustration and embarrassment. Maggie, however, remained perfectly composed. "I'm specifically interested in this car," she repeated, her tone unwavering. "For my sister's birthday next month." Blake exhaled sharply, stepping away from the Harringtons and lowering his voice. "Look," he said, his tone edged with condescension, "I understand people like to dream, but this is a place of business. That vehicle will cost more than most homes. Now, I've been patient, but you're interrupting a legitimate sale." Maggie met his gaze steadily. "I'm prepared to make a cash purchase today." That was when Blake's professional veneer completely cracked. He let out a short, harsh laugh that echoed across the showroom floor. Several more heads turned, eyes widening at the unfolding confrontation. "A cash purchase? Really?" His voice was louder now, deliberately designed to humiliate. "This isn't a yard sale, His sharp gaze shifting between Blake, Maggie, and the now silent showroom. $250,000. Blake had scoffed moments earlier, his tone dripping with derision. "People who can afford these cars don't dress like." He gestured dismissively at Maggie's outfit, his expression making it clear exactly what he thought of her. Maggie felt her cheeks flush, not from embarrassment, but from a slow-building anger. Not for herself. She'd experienced such treatment before, but for anyone who had ever been judged by their appearance. "I believe my money is as good as anyone else's," she said quietly. Blake stepped closer, towering over her. "Let me be clear," he said, no longer bothering to hide his disdain. "You are wasting my time and embarrassing yourself. Either make an appointment for a serious discussion, dressed appropriately, or please leave the premises." The showroom had gone silent. The Harringtons had stepped away from the car, visibly uncomfortable. "Is there a problem here?" A new voice cut through the tension. Richard Mason, the dealership's owner, had been drawn by the commotion. Blake straightened his tie hastily, his confidence faltering. "No problem, sir," he said smoothly. "Just explaining to this lady that we operate by appointment for serious buyers." Richard Mason's sharp eyes flicked between them, assessing the situation in an instant. Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked toward the exit. Richard Mason had quickly taken in Maggie's simple appearance and the watching crowd. His expression made it clear which side he was taking. "I see," he said. "Miss Collins," Maggie supplied. "Margaret Collins." "Miss Collins," Mason corrected himself, his tone carefully neutral. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Our clientele typically, they understand the exclusivity of our vehicles." "I understand perfectly," Maggie replied, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "Your sales manager has made your policies quite clear." Blake stepped forward again, his voice dripping with condescension. "If you're genuinely interested, which I doubt, you can call for an appointment. But I'd suggest bringing proof of funds and dressing the part." He gestured around the showroom with a smirk. "These cars are for a certain class of people." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Someone snickered. Maggie looked around, the judging faces, Blake's smug expression, the owner's tacit approval of his employees' behavior. She'd faced discrimination before, but rarely so blatantly, so publicly. "I see," she said simply, her dignity intact. "But," outed the incident at the dealership, her voice measured but tinged with lingering frustration. Spirits bruised, she had turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, Blake's voice carried, not quite quiet enough. "Some people just don't know their place." As she pushed through the glass doors into the morning sunlight, Maggie pulled out her phone. The humiliation still stung, but a small, resolute smile formed on her lips as she dialed. The Collins estate sat on 5 quiet acres outside Boston, its understated elegance revealing nothing of the billions behind its ownership. Alexander Collins preferred it that way. At 41, the tech visionary had revolutionized renewable energy storage technology, building a fortune while maintaining a deliberately low profile. When Maggie entered his home office, Alexander looked up from his desk, immediately setting aside his work. 15 years of marriage had taught him to read her expressions with precision. Something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, moving around the desk to meet her. Maggie sank into a leather chair, the morning's events washing over her anew. "It was educational," she said with a wry smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "By appearance or assumptions," she finished firmly. Maggie recounted the experience at the dealership, the condescension, the humiliation, the blatant discrimination. As she spoke, Alexander's expression darkened, but he remained silent, giving her the space to process. "It's not about me," she concluded. "I have the privilege of walking away, knowing the truth. But how many people get treated that way every day without the comfort of knowing they actually could afford what they're being denied?" Alexander nodded thoughtfully. In their years together, this was what had always moved him most about Maggie, her consistent concern for others, even when she herself had been wronged. "So," he said finally, "what would you like to do about it?" "Part of me wants to do nothing," she admitted. "Just buy Caroline's gift elsewhere." She hesitated, then shook her head. "But then I think about that young salesman, Daniel, who treated me with respect, regardless of how I was dressed. And I think about all the people who face that kind of judgment without having any recourse." She looked directly at Alexander, her gaze unwavering. These people need to understand that worth isn't determined. But for everyone who had silently stood by, "Worth isn't determined by appearance," Maggie had said, "but I don't want vengeance. I want awareness." Alexander nodded slowly, a plan forming. "I think I might have an idea that accomplishes both." "Nothing too dramatic," Maggie warned, knowing her husband's protective instincts all too well. He chuckled. "No buying the dealership and firing everyone, I promise." Maggie smirked. "Good. But maybe—" Alexander leaned forward, eyes twinkling. "A little education is in order." Together, they crafted a plan, not for revenge but for enlightenment. Something that might shift perspectives more effectively than simple retribution ever could. "Are you sure you don't want to come along?" Alexander asked once they had finalized the details. Maggie shook her head. "This isn't about me needing to witness their comeuppance. It's about them learning to see beyond appearances." She paused, then added with a small smile, "But I do expect a full report." As evening settled over their home, Alexander made several phone calls, setting things in motion for the following morning. Tomorrow would bring a powerful lesson in humility and the danger of assumptions. Not just for Blake. Boston Luxury Motors' image was everything. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and join our community of story lovers. Now let's get back to see what happens next. The following morning arrived with picture-perfect weather. Blake Thompson entered Boston Luxury Motors with a confident stride, straightening his signature blue tie. Yesterday's incident with the underdressed woman had become nothing more than an amusing anecdote, one he had shared over drinks with colleagues. Another delusional dreamer, thinking she belonged in the world of luxury. The showroom gleamed under carefully positioned lights, exotic cars arranged strategically to maximize their allure. Blake had just finished leading the morning staff meeting, his tone firm as he emphasized the importance of qualifying customers properly. Remember, he had instructed the sales team, "Our time is valuable. We cater to a specific clientele. It's not elitism, it's efficiency." Daniel, the young salesman, had remained quiet throughout the meeting, his discomfort evident. Blake made a mental note to have a word with him later about the proper way to assess customers. At Wealth and Influence. At precisely 10:17 a.m., The distinctive purr of an exceptional engine drew every eye toward the showroom's floor-to-ceiling windows. A vehicle unlike any other glided to a stop directly in front of the main entrance. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Even Blake, typically unimpressed by luxury vehicles due to his daily proximity to them, felt his pulse quicken. A Rolls-Royce Phantom extended wheelbase. But not just any Phantom. This was a custom model, its midnight blue finish shifting subtly in the sunlight, a mesmerizing effect only the rarest paint formulations could achieve. Conservative estimates would place its value north of $1.2 million. Is that? Richard Mason, the dealership's owner, had emerged from his office, drawn by the sudden silence. The spoke Phantom, Blake confirmed, already moving toward the entrance, his voice laced with uncharacteristic awe. Extremely rare configuration. A uniformed chauffeur stepped out first, rounding the vehicle with white-glove precision to open the rear passenger door. From the Rolls-Royce emerged a man of commanding presence, tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that whispered rather than shouted. Just received an exclusive shipment of limited edition models. Its five-figure price tag was nothing compared to the presence of the man himself. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly groomed, his posture effortlessly authoritative. Blake's salesman instincts kicked into overdrive. This wasn't just a good prospect, this was the kind of client dealerships competed for. The kind whose purchases didn't just include one vehicle, but potentially an ongoing relationship worth millions. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors," Blake called out, intercepting the distinguished visitor before any other salesperson could approach. Blake Thompson, sales manager. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today." The man regarded Blake with an unreadable expression, then offered a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Alexander Collins," he replied simply, offering a firm handshake. Blake's mind raced. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but he couldn't immediately place it. Regardless, the Rolls-Royce spoke volumes about the man's financial status. "Mr. Collins, it's truly an honor. What brings you to our humble establishment today?" Blake gestured smoothly toward the showroom. "Perhaps I could show you our newest arrivals. We just received an exclusive shipment of limited edition models. Customers here at Boston Luxury Motors." Alexander raised a hand slightly, halting Blake's practice pitch. "Actually, I'm here about a specific vehicle, the Azure Coupe. Midnight blue." Blake's smile broadened. "Excellent choice, sir. One of only 15 produced this year. I'd be delighted to show you. It's actually right over." "I know where it is," Alexander interrupted smoothly. His tone was calm, but there was an edge beneath it. "My wife was here yesterday, expressing interest in it." Blake's customer service smile remained fixed, though a flicker of confusion crossed his eyes. "Your wife? I don't recall. Perhaps one of my colleagues assisted her." Alexander's expression cooled noticeably. "No, Mr. Thompson, you assisted her. Or rather, you refused to. Margaret Collins. She was wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. You suggested she might be more comfortable looking at used cars." The blood drained from Blake's face. Behind him, a small gasp escaped Daniel, who had been hovering nearby. "Mr. Collins, Blake stammered, his usual smooth delivery deserting him. "There must be some misunderstanding. We welcome all. Reflection of our values here at Boston Luxury Motors." By now, Richard Mason had approached, sensing that a situation was unfolding. "Is everything all right, Blake?" Alexander turned his attention to the owner. "Mr. Mason, I presume?" Richard straightened. "Yes, indeed. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors." "Thank you," Alexander replied, his tone polite yet unwavering. "I was just explaining to Mr. Thompson that my wife visited yesterday, interested in purchasing the Azure Coupe as a gift for her sister. She was, however, treated in a manner that I find troubling." Richard's expression shifted rapidly, from welcoming to concerned. I'm sorry to hear that," he said, his voice suddenly hesitant. "I believe I was briefly involved in a conversation, but I wasn't aware of all the details." Alexander nodded thoughtfully, his gaze steady. The details include your sales manager here suggesting that people like her don't belong in an establishment like this, based solely on her casual attire. By now, a small crowd had gathered, salespeople, support staff, even a few early customers. The showroom had gone completely silent. Mr. Collins, Blake began, desperation creeping into his voice. If there was any misunderstanding, it wasn't a Azure Coupe. My wife was prepared to purchase it yesterday, in cash, but instead, she was judged and dismissed. Daniel suddenly spoke up. All eyes turned to the young salesman, who looked surprised at his own courage. Miss Collins was treated poorly, he said, his voice steady despite the tension. She was polite and specific about her interest in the Azure, and she was dismissed repeatedly, based solely on her appearance. Blake shot Daniel a withering look, but the damage was already done. Alexander turned back to Richard Mason. You know, it's interesting, he said smoothly. My wife founded and runs the Collins Foundation for Children with Disabilities. It's been her life's work since before I met her. She's raised over $50 million for specialized medical equipment and educational programs. He paused, letting the weight of that statement sink in. Maggie chooses to dress simply because she believes in living modestly, despite our means. She finds it keeps her connected to the family she helps. It's one of the countless reasons I love her. Richard Mason had gone pale. Mr. Collins, I assure you, this does not reflect the values of our dealership. We pride ourselves on. Actions speak louder than mission statements. Mr. Mason, Alexander interrupted firmly. Now, regarding the next month, Alexander continued, his voice even but unmistakably firm. An event dedicated to funding specialized medical programs for children with disabilities. If Boston Luxury Motors truly values inclusivity and respect, then I propose you become a platinum sponsor. Richard Mason blinked, clearly caught off guard. A platinum sponsor, he echoed, his mind already calculating. A 7-figure commitment, Alexander clarified, and a public acknowledgement at the event. Your dealership's name will be associated with an organization that values people for who they are, not for what they wear. The silence in the showroom deepened. Blake looked physically ill. A deal of this magnitude, and it was slipping away. Richard hesitated for only a fraction of a second before forcing a gracious smile. Mr. Collins, we would be honored to support such a cause, he said quickly. Alexander gave a small, knowing nod. Good. Then I'll consider keeping my business here. He glanced at Blake, whose face was now ashen. Of course, Alexander added. There's just one more matter to address. He turned to Mason. Surely you agree that Boston Luxury Motors should be represented by individuals who embody the values you claim to uphold? Mason's forced smile faltered. Blake stiffened. The meaning behind Alexander's words was unmistakable. A small nod of approval. Then let's get started. Blake stood frozen, his face pale as the weight of the moment settled on him. A volunteer? He had spent his career catering to the elite, ensuring exclusivity. Now he was being sent to assist children with disabilities, to serve rather than sell. The lesson was clear. I understand, sir. Blake finally managed his voice tight. Alexander didn't respond, merely giving him a final measured look before turning back to Daniel. Let's make this a smooth process, he said. My wife values efficiency. Daniel straightened, determination replacing his initial shock. Of course, Mr. Collins. Right this way. Richard Mason, still rattled, forced a smile. Mr. Collins, again, we deeply appreciate this opportunity to make things right. Alexander met his gaze evenly. See that you do. As the paperwork began, murmurs rippled through the showroom. Boston Luxury Motors would never operate the same way again. Somewhere along the way, it became something more. Blake had spent weeks assisting children in adaptive sports programs, witnessing firsthand the resilience, determination, and joy that had nothing to do with wealth or status. He had seen kids accomplish things he never thought possible, things that humbled him. Tonight, as he helped a young boy navigate the ballroom, he felt something unfamiliar. Purpose. Across the room, Alexander and Maggie stood side by side, watching the evening unfold. He's different, Maggie murmured, noticing Blake's patience and genuine attentiveness. Alexander nodded. Some lessons can't be taught in a boardroom. As the night progressed, the true success of the event wasn't measured in the millions raised. It was in the perspectives changed. Boston Luxury Motors was now a platinum sponsor. Blake Thompson was no longer the same man. And somewhere in the city, a midnight blue Azure coupe sat in a driveway, waiting for a woman who had beaten cancer, a woman who had always dreamed of owning a luxury car. A car that wasn't just a gift, but a symbol of worth, of resilience, of the power of seeing beyond appearances. The end. They give you a reason to think otherwise. Maggie studied him for a moment, then offered a small, approving nod. Growth isn't about perfection, Mr. Thompson. It's about recognizing where you went wrong and choosing to be better. Blake exhaled, feeling the weight of the past month settle differently in his chest. Not as guilt, but as resolve. I intend to, he said firmly. Maggie smiled. Good. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe Thomas is eager to critique your shooting technique again. Blake chuckled, shaking his head. I'd better not disappoint my coach. As he turned back toward the court, something had shifted, not just in how he saw others, but in how he saw himself. He quickly composed himself. I would be honored, sir. Alexander nodded approvingly. Good. Consider it a chance to put your new perspective into practice. Blake swallowed, the weight of the moment settling in. This wasn't just a second chance. It was a testament to the changes he had made. Maggie smiled. Growth is a process, Mr. Thompson. Keep at it. Blake straightened, a quiet determination in his posture. I will, Mrs. Collins. I promise. As Alexander and Maggie moved away, Blake took a deep breath. The past month had been humbling, but for the first time in a long while, he felt something unexpected, pride, not in what he owned, but in who he was becoming. That evening, as the event wound down, Blake watched Maggie and Alexander Collins moving through the room. Not as power players flaunting their wealth or influence, but as two people genuinely connecting with each child and family. A month ago, he would have dismissed someone like Maggie based solely on her casual appearance. Now, he understood that true value wasn't measured in designer labels, luxury cars, or executive titles, but in character, in kindness, in the impact one had on others. As Blake helped Thomas back into his wheelchair after a photo session, the boy grinned up at him. You know what, Mr. Blake? You're pretty cool for a grown-up. Blake smiled, something warm and unguarded in his expression. Coming from you, Thomas, that's the highest compliment I've received in a very long time. And he meant it. We all make judgments based on appearances. But as Blake Thompson had learned, looking beyond the surface could reveal extraordinary people and life-changing opportunities. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences and insights might just inspire someone else.